Hello everyone and welcome to a draft breakdown of the LJL 15th day, which is the same day this is being recorded. This is actually during the live stream, so it will be all sorts of wonky and stuff like that. But I have had an interest in League of Legends for quite some while. I've done some personal coaching in the past, however under a different name, so don't even bother. I want to give my opinion on drafts and item builds in the game, and I'm going to focus primarily on the Japanese region because I think it's a minor region, sure, but it doesn't really get a lot of coverage in the Western world, at least from what I've seen, and I think that's very underrepresented because they have some really fun champion picks sometimes in drafts, and I just love that. But with that out of the way, this is probably going to be such a long video that I'm not going to be capable of going into the builds of this particular game between Sengoku Gaming and Fennel, simply because I'm going to talk so much about the draft and also my drafting principles and also about a lot of the terminology I will be using in future episodes. So I'll probably skip the particular item build section from this particular game. But with that said, let's just get started right away by analyzing the first ban of the game, which is the Sengoku Gaming's Jax ban. Jax is fairly blind pickable in his current state, but I do not like him as, well, a blind pick in this particular state. When it comes to meme and my personal philosophy, I think the first ban Robin should all be about banning Z-tier champions and S-tier champions that are very versatile or flexible, and I do not believe Jax is a flexible or versatile S-tier champion. So let's start with explaining those two terminologies. To me, a flexible champion is a champion that can be played in several different roles, like top lane and mid lane and bot lane and support, for example. That would be a very flexible champion, and it would make them really strong in the draft, especially in the early on in the draft. And a versatile champion is a champion who has several different ways to be played and or itemized. For example, if we take Maokai, he could be played in a more of a pick-oriented style because of his W and because of his saplings providing intel and vision, also being able to randomly pop on an enemy, and his ultimate, he can be played more in a team style kind of style, with his W and Q mainly being for disruption and his ultimate forcing the enemy to clump all together, which you can synergize really well then with like an Aphelios ultimate, an Orianna ultimate, a Malphite ultimate, an Ornn ultimate. You can just synergize that so well with so many champions. Or you can play him in a bit more disengaged style, using his saplings as really big slows, using his Q for a bit of disruption, and his ultimate as just a really good peeling tool. Now that doesn't mean all of these are equally strong, or that we will see all of them, but at least it shows a form of versatility. You can pick him and have him work in several different team compositions, or have him work in several different ways, even in the same team composition. And I think that is very valuable for a particular champion to have. Now, when it comes to Jax, he is not really that versatile. He's not really that flexible either. He is probably only going to be playing in the top lane because I don't think Jax jungle is strong enough. And when it comes to the versatility, well, he pretty much have split push or pick somebody off. Now with his new ultimate, he is a bit better in skirmishes and team fights, but he's still not really a team fight champion. That's not really where he shines. And split push is kind of dead right now, sadly, so he's mostly for these skirmishes with his new ultimate, where he can actually shine a bit, but that's not particularly versatile, and like I said, it's not particularly flexible. So even though he might be an S-tier champion, I do not think he is worth to be banned in the very first round robin, because you can draft against him, you can pick neutralizes, you can pick counters, you can simply choose a team composition that counters what Jax wants to do. With that said, we get similar issues with Caitlyn. Caitlyn, we see her mostly in the bot lane role and the support role, but she could theoretically also be played in the top lane role, and so that instantly makes her a bit more flexible than something like Jax. However, her versatility is extremely low. No matter where you play her, she will always be about dominating lane, using her traps, using her wave manipulation, and using her superior range. And that can be dealt with. There are characters in the game that can deal with her wave clear by either matching it, probably not having better wave clear in the early game, but as the game goes on, there's definitely a lot of characters who can match her wave clear. So, in my opinion, because she is so one-dimensional, you know exactly what she's going to do, you know where she's most likely to be played. She is not really a character that is worth it to be banned here. Karma is really good at keeping up with her and also providing a shield against her poke. A Q-Max Soraka can kinda help, but it's not the most optimal way, of course, to play Soraka or in the particular matchup. A Ziggs can really help with the wave clear. Of course, this would be Ziggs bot lane, can really deal with the same wave clear as Caitlyn has, making Caitlyn lose a lot of her priority, and she doesn't really outrange Ziggs' Q or E, so she can't really do what she wants to do, and then Ziggs just outscales. So I don't think a Caitlyn in the first ban rotation is super good. I can see why teams do that, but once again, she's kind of like this SA tier champion that is narrow enough, just like Jax, where I don't think it deserves a ban this early on when there are super strong champions like Karma, there are champions like Udyr, there are champions like, what else would be good? I think Senna is pretty good, even though she's going to get even better. So yeah, Maokai as well. Yeah, how could I forget Maokai? Maokai is super good as well. So we have a lot of characters already that should have a bit higher priority when it comes to the ban table because they are flexible or versatile or just objectively really strong. So yeah. Then we see that responded with a Nautilus pick. Nautilus is not that good of a support right now. He is extremely squishy compared to other engaged supports, and it doesn't provide that much more. This is 13.3, so Thresh has already gotten a lot of damage buffs, so he can do a similar role to Nautilus, but also have the versatility of being a peeling champion, while also dealing more damage than Nautilus and being tankier than Nautilus. So I don't think Nautilus is really a justifiable ban here. You can pick something like Lulu against the Nautilus, you can pick pretty much a lot of enchanters would actually do pretty well into Nautilus, or if you really want to pick an engaged supports, there are just better options than Nautilus, who are tankier, who deals more damage, and who can do it in a safer manner than Nautilus, because Nautilus is he's throwing his entire body in and hoping the enemy dies before he dies, because he is going to get one popped. So I don't think that's a particularly good ban whatsoever. And so let's see what Fennel bans here next. This is a live reaction, by the way, so I haven't actually seen this draft beforehand. We see the Ashe ban. Ashe is just like Caitlyn. She is very one-dimensional. She is a bit less flexible than Caitlyn, but she's not super versatile. She's going to poke, she's going to be very utility-centric for the entire team with her ultimates and her W and the vision she gets with her E. Regardless if you put her in the support role or in the bot lane role, she is going to just be providing your team with a lot of things that are good for the team. She's not a carry by herself, nor does she really do anything carry-esque by herself, so I'm not the biggest fan of seeing her being banned. Like, yes, she is a bit flexible, she is a strong champion, but she is not S tier in my opinion, which means that I don't think she ever should be banned here unless she's a direct counter in the second round robin of the bans. And that's what I call it, second round robin or first round robin, the ban phases, but yeah. Now we see the Elise ban. Early ganking is currently the meta because you get no benefit from actually power clearing the jungle. You catch up so easily when you're just ganking all the time, and Elise is always going to be the beneficiary for that kind of metagames. Being so good in the early game, being able to reset tower aggro, especially now when towers are stronger, so tower dives are a lot more difficult to pull off successfully. She still has the same utility she always have with her Spider Form E in order to reset the tower damage. I think she's the most justifiable here, together with the Jax, but I'm not the biggest fan of an Elise ban, because she does have ways to get countered in the jungle. She has thematic counters because you know exactly what she's going to do. She's not a very versatile champion, she's going to fall off, and games are not necessarily super short nowadays. You do see a lot of people getting a lot of items because games are typically decided by the Baron or by the Elder Dragon or by the Dragon Soul, so you can't guarantee that Elise won't fall off, which I think instantly makes her not really that scary to be banned in the first round robin. And If Sengoku Gaming are banned right now, potentially what they're trying to do is just tell Fennel that you're not going to be allowed to pick Elise, so we can pick weak laners and really tower dive susceptible laners. But that doesn't really necessarily fix the issue, because Jarvan does exist in this patch, so we still have ganking junglers, we still have Zac, Jarvan, that Fennel could pick, that would still be able to do the dive, especially Zac with his passive, and, you know, gank lanes in the early game. So the Elise ban, sure, she might be the best out of them in some scenarios, but it's just, you're not shutting down what her thematic is. She's not strong enough to be one of these bans you have to ban, and I don't think we're ever going to see like an Elise support or Elise top lane where so flexibility is completely redundant, although she does have some flexibility as a champion in herself. Then we see Fennel's Maokai ban, and that is just 100% justifiable. I've already talked about it before when I tried to explain why versatility is so strong. He can even be played in some very few top lane matchups and support matchups, so he has a tiny bit of flexibility, but it's mostly his versatility and just him being just a powerhouse in general. He does all of his versatile modes really, really well, so it's 100% an understandable ban. I think it's a good ban for Fennel, but we still have so many more picks that are left on the table. We have the Udyr, we have the Gangplank, we have my favorite, Senna, because she allows so many different strategies when she's going fasting Senna, or even support Senna. We have one more super strong picks. Do we have... I think those are pretty much the strongest, Udyr, Gangplank, and Senna, in my opinion. We're probably not going to see any of them being picked because it's pro play and it's a very stale meta, because pro players don't really like to play new champions until somebody else has shown that they are actually viable. So yeah. Sejuani is not a pick I am particularly fond of. The reason being, she is not really that flexible. She could be playing in the top lane, she could be playing in the jungle, and she could be playing in the support role. So she is flexible in that sense, but sadly, if we take it in context with the pro meta, she's almost definitely going to be in the jungle. Now, the reason I don't like Sejuani, even though she is Sejuani first pick here, is even though she is quite flexible, it has ways of being countered. That's the problem I have. If you think she's going to go jungle, actually you can just pick a Trundle, and then you can match the top or jungle Sejuani with the Trundle. You can even have the Trundle support if you want to match her regardless, and you've already been able to shut down all Sejuani's flexibility with your own flexible champion, and you've only used one of your picks, you've used none of your bans, and you've shut Sejuani down. But even if that is not what you want to go for, you still have a lot of ways to shut a Sejuani down. Simply, you know exactly what she's going to do. Regardless of where she is going to be all about her ultimate being able to just pick off someone who's really, really frail, like the bot laner or the mid laner, or if there's a very frail top laner or jungler, and you have the huge AoE zone from her ultimate be able to do a lot of work. You know she wants to be paired with melee champions for her passive. She is very not versatile. She is a bit flexible, but she has no versatility whatsoever. And her main point, being pretty much her passive and her ultimate, means that she has ways to be drafted against or played against. Like, now when you have the Sejuani, you can just pick somebody who can face tank her ultimate, like an Ornn being able to completely negate even the stun with his W. We have Sion just being an obnoxious tank. Cassante is a bit of an obnoxious tank as well, but I don't think he does it as well as Sion or Ornn when it comes to particularly Sejuani. Or you could just have people who are really, really good versus these one ability reliant champions, you know, like Morgana's Black Shield, or you have Sivir, at least that would put her in safety. We have Cleanse, the summoner spell, if you want to have like a Sivir bot lane and you have a vulnerable mid laner, the mid laner can take Cleanse, and then none of the good targets for Sejuani's ultimate will be able to actually be stunned by the ult, or even that affected by the ult. So I think it's not the best first pick, because you can counter her thematics 100% with your own picks and drafts. You can adapt to her. So she is a good champion to be picked later on, but not this early, considering Fennel has not picked a single champion, they can just do all they can to completely shut Sejuani down while having a good composition themselves. They don't really have to pay or go that far out of the meta to counter Sejuani's thematics. Then we see the Karma here. I think that's justifiable. She is extremely flexible. She can be played in 4 positions, all positions but the jungle in my opinion. She is probably the best in the mid lane or in the support role, because then she will have more access to the map, she will have more access to help her allies, because top lane is a pretty good neutralizer, top lane Karma. However, she does not really get to buff anybody, so she has to be a bit solitary, which might make you see a tank Karma or make you see a bit more AP heavy Karma, because she has a lower incentive to actually build a bit more supportive. But I do think a very supportive Karma is the best role, which is why the mid lane and support Karma I think are some of her better positions, but she can of course also be played in a bot lane, because if she gets to farm, she can actually be really obnoxious with a lot of items. So, with that said, I think that's a perfectly fine pick. She's very flexible and she's quite versatile as well. You can be a more Q reliant and therefore a bit more of a poke champion. You can be more sustain reliant and just, hey, let's have a long fight with her E's short cooldown to get with her W, healing herself up. She can, with her mantra E, just be a good team fight and utility tool for everybody. You're basically giving everybody in your team a better version of Sivir's ultimate on a shorter cooldown as well. That is fantastic, especially versus somebody like Sejuani. You can help your allies get out of the way of the Sejuani ultimate, or within the slowing zone of her ultimate's remnants, you can get people to move around like normal, so it's not even that effective on Karma's team. I think it's a wonderful pick by Fennel here. It's definitely just a pick. Even though this individual champion strength of Karma might not be S tier or Z tier, her flexibility and versatility makes her such a good champion early on in the draft nonetheless, because you are revealing so little information. Now, here comes the Varus. Varus Karma is a really good bot lane, because good luck winning versus that bot lane or shutting that bot lane down. They might not always be able to win versus you, but you will pretty much never be able to win versus them. Varus is a bit flexible still. He can still go in the mid lane and he can go in the support role if this is like a mid Karma. So he has a bit of flexibility, although I am going to presume that it's the standard pro play we're going to see here. Non-spicy Varus Karma bot lane, and we're probably going to see lethality Varus, even though depending on how the draft plays out, we might actually see an AP Varus would have been better. But that is also one of the strengths of Varus as a pick. Simply his flexibility. Once again, he has 3 modes. AP Varus, which is just, I'm gonna one-shot tanks. We have lethality, which is, I'm going to 2-shot squishies. Or we have the on-hit, which is, I'm going to keep kiting you for days, and you're going to die if you let me kite you for more than 3 seconds. So he has 3 modes. He has 3 positions, so he's versatile and flexible. He synergizes with Karma, and both of them are very flexible together, so it becomes really difficult for Sengoku Gaming now to actually not lump themselves in such a position for Varus to not be super effective. So what Sengoku Gaming have to do now in order to minimize the impact of the Varus pick is make sure that any of the 3 build paths for Varus, none of them are good. So you already have a tank here who can be kited a bit by Varus, which means that now you need to maybe put 1 more tank to incentivize the AP build, but then you start going up quite a lot of squishies in order to incentivize the lethality build, and suddenly Varus is in a lose-lose-lose-lose situation. What you have to be careful about though is you can't let the kiting Varus, the on-hit Varus, ever become effective, but having 2 squishies probably neutralizes that regardless. So Sengoku Gaming should go for maybe a tanky top laner and then go for a squishy mid and a squishy bot lane. Not super squishy, of course, so lethality Varus doesn't get too much value, but at least make Varus a bit conflicted with either being able to deal with the tanks or the squishies. He can't deal with both at the same time. Here we see Renekton. Renekton is a bruiser. He should go a bit more... Oh, so Silas as well. this becomes now a problem, because Sengoku Gaming has really made on-hit Varus good now. On-hit Varus will be able to kite the Renekton, will be able to kite the Sylas. Thanks to his ultimate, he doesn't need to worry that much about the slice and dice from Renekton, and you never need to worry that much about Sylas, because after all, he needs to land his E, which you can sidestep, especially together with the Karma Shield. So the on-hit build on Varus is currently super good for Fennel. 3 of the carries, the entire top side of Sengoku Gaming, is now weak to the on-hit kiting Varus build, and that is extremely bad for Sengoku Gaming. This might even incentivize the Varus, or in the theoretical happy world, make Varus actually go for the on-hit build in the mid lane, just so he can shut down the entire topside in topside skirmishes. But we're probably not going to see that, but that would have been a potential angle if everybody could, or if Recap could play the Varus. So yeah, but with that said, I should probably analyze both Renekton and Sylas a bit more, or at least my opinion on some of them. Renekton, his lethality on hit hybrid glass cannon build is really scary. It's a really strong build that I think is very slept on in competitive play. I've faced it, and it's atrocious. Even though you are a tank, you are going to get one shot more or less because of the interaction between Prowler's Claws, Damage Amp, and Blade of Ruin King, together with Press the Attack, together with Renekton's Power W. It's just extremely scary to face, and he's not super vulnerable either because of his ultimate giving him a lot of HP. So I think Renekton does have a lot of places where he can definitely be picked. With that said, this is a blind pick Renekton, who's not only kinda weak to what Fennel have already drafted, but he can get counter-drafted in the top lane as well. He can become shut down by somebody who is able to disengage. We have, of course, the very classical Quinn top lane example, but we don't even need to go that far. We just need somebody who's able to tank the damage, although that can be difficult for the against the Renekton if the Renekton builds properly. But we can also just see somebody who is able to deal with the slice and dice, and if they're still able to be alive after that, well, good luck, Renekton is now completely useless. So yeah. Sylas is a counter pick. He is relying on the enemy having going to ultimates, so I don't think he's blind pickable like this at all. Varus is a good ultimate to steal, but apart from that, you are just setting yourself up to get counterpicked in the mid lane, and there's no reason for Fennel to continue picking strong ultimates now, because they already counted the entire top side of the map with the Varus, and a bit with the Karma as well, but now you can just counterpick the Sylas, just with the rest of your team composition, but also in the mid lane, and it looks like we're going to see a Kassadin here. Kassadin is going to lose the early levels to Sylas probably, but he just outscales the Sylas. He doesn't provide Sylas with a good ultimate, and around mid game, Kassadin is just going to win, and Sylas can't, or Kassadin is going to win mid game onwards, and Sylas can't do enough in the early game to really shut Kassadin down. I mean, immediately we're seeing Jet's Sylas here is countered in his lane. There is no good ultimate. The Karma ultimate is not that good to steal. The Kassadin ultimate is not good to steal. He is countered by on-hit Varus if he goes on-hit Varus. So it's just, I don't know exactly what Sengoku Gaming was going for here, but it's not looking good. Fennel is currently hard-winning draft. Now, when it comes to what bans we want to see from Fennel is Sivir is understandable. They don't want to give more mobility to Sengoku Gaming, but I think more what would be dangerous for Fennel to face would potentially be something that can get really onto the enemy, or get onto themselves, I'm sorry. Sivir would help Sengoku Gaming's comp getting onto Fennel's composition, but I think a lot more dangerous things would be to have a way to get to the Varus or to the Karma without, you know, being just walking at them like Sengoku Gaming are doing right now. Now, how exactly would you do that? Try to think here. Bot laners as supports that could do that. We do have the Leona ultimate, could partially do that, especially because on-hit Varus is going to be medium ranged. It's not going to be the super long range of lethality Varus. So we do have the Leona ultimate that could work with that. We could potentially have our own support. What more could we have? Yeah, it's a bit difficult of a situation for Sengoku Gaming because they've already been counted so hard. There's not really any particular. Yeah, maybe the silver ban wasn't so bad after all because I don't see. I mean, technically, Sengoku Gaming doesn't have any good picks that would help them with the huge trench they've dug themselves. So yeah, I guess silver was maybe one of the better bans. Now we see the Jace ban. I'm going to presume it's for the Jace top versus Renekton. So this brings us in a bit to the topic of compositions. Fennel has, even though Kassadin is individually good versus Silas, doesn't really synergize that well with the Varus Karma. Even though Varus is going to this time go a bit on hit, so he's a bit more skirmishing, he's a bit more kiting, and Karma can definitely has a mode that facilitates that. Kassadin is going to be more one pop, but definitely versus these champions is going to be a bit more skirmishing, a bit more drawn out fights. So I guess that's going to be something Kassadin hopefully goes for, a bit more AP bruisery in order to have sustained fights to facilitate the Varus and the Karma. Now, with that said, what that means now is what Fennel needs for the last two picks in the jungle and the top lane is something that complements that sort of playstyle. Jace does not complement that playstyle. Individually, Jace can be good versus Renekton. However, if we look at the bigger picture with the team compositions, it doesn't make sense whatsoever. And that makes Jace, in my opinion at least, a pretty bad ban here. You are banning a lane counter, or a soft counter in lane. However, if Fennel were to pick Jace, they are starting to grief the draft a bit, because Jace is not helping the team in skirmishes or team fights as well as other champions would have been able to do. Because what Fennel needs right now is they have a lot of people who want now to skirmish and be the damage dealers of these skirmishes or drawn-out fights, but they need somebody to tank those drawn-out fights and skirmishes, maybe even initiate them. So that's what Fennel needs. That's not something that Jace can provide. So I don't really see the purpose of the Jace ban here. Fennel is much more in need of something like maybe a Jarvan in order to start out and put this zone where a lot of people are in, even though Sengoku's mobility makes it difficult to actually lock people down with the Jarvan ultimate. We definitely need to see something a bit more engaging like that. Maybe a Sion would be pretty good for Fennel, as he can just face tank a lot of things, he can start a fight, he can peel for a fight, and he doesn't mind an extended fight either. He can definitely guarantee an extended fight with his passive. So those picks are a lot more scary to see on Fennel's remaining two picks than the Jace. Then we see Jin here. Jin is just a trash champion. That's a terrible ban. And then we see Wukong. Wukong is also definitely one of these characters that could help facilitate and start and drawn out fights. So even though it's not as tanky as I would like one of Fennel's picks, it's a lot more understandable and a lot more reasonable than the Jace ban. So we'll see what is picked here. Vi doesn't do that well in drawn-out fights. She's a lot about just getting to one hard-to-reach person with her ultimate and lock them down a bit with the Q follow-up after that, or maybe they even need Q ultimate. But out of the three targets in Sengoku Gaming, none of them are good right now, so this Vi pick doesn't really synergize with Fennel's team composition, nor does she shut down or counter anybody from Sengoku Gaming. The only thing it does right now is making a Zeri pick from Sengoku Gaming rather bad, but there's so many more bot laners in the meta that there was never a need to pick specifically Zeri, which means that the ban or preemptive Vi that kind of would soft ban Zeri is just not even needed. So I do not like that jungle pick whatsoever. Especially because Vi, if she built properly, can still get pretty screwed up by the existing Sengoku Gaming champions. So that's interesting. We are seeing the Zeri, despite Zeri actually doing really poorly versus Vi, because she can't run away from Vi's ultimate. But we do see the Annie, and Annie is such a powerhouse. She's actually one of the champions I forgot should probably be banned in 13.3. She is so flexible. She is not versatile, but her numbers are so bonkers that that together with the flexibility just, I mean, in terms of stats, she's S or Z tier, and then when you take the flexibility into account, she definitely needed to be banned. But here, we are seeing an Annie bot lane. I don't think the Annie bot lane, or Annie support here, which is the bot lane but not the bot lane role, she doesn't synergize super well with Zeri, so it's a bit weird combo. Also, she can be very innocuous versus Fennel though, so it is a pretty good support pick. I'm not a fan of the Zeri. I think the Zeri should have been somebody who can more facilitate the team, as the team already has a lot of damage. But yeah, the Annie pick, fantastic, for a lot of reasons. One, she is going to be really good in skirmishes. She's going to be basically like another body in skirmishes and drawn out fights that is going to be providing so much value. Two, there needed to be more magic damage on Sengoku Gaming's team composition, because Silas is what I like to refer to as like half magic damage. So I probably should explain that first. I think a team composition should ideally have 1.5 magic damage and 1.5 physical damage. Now, the champions, depending on how much damage they deal, will be able to provide maybe 0.5, 1.0, or maybe even 0.25 of their respective damage dealing. Silas is one of these. You don't pick him for the absolute absurdity of damage he deals. It's not a Cassiopeia, it's not an Orianna, it's not a Syndra. It doesn't have the same damage as them. So when it comes to damage he puts on a table, it's only 0.5 of this imaginary unit magic damage. But Annie deals 100% with that 1.0 magic damage needed. Now, it's a support role, so it's going to be heavily diminished, but with the proper itemization, like a demonic embrace, it doesn't really matter if she's super far behind in terms of gold, and she will still be able to put out a lot of damage. So Sengoku Gaming having the end being able to scrub together about 1.0 to 1.5 magic damage, which is perfectly fine and just makes this end pick even better, because it was exactly what Sengoku needed. Now, when it comes to Fennel, in terms of that very same respect, on-hit Varus is already 1.0, or he's a bit split. He's 0.5 magic damage and 0.5 physical damage, because his W is magic damage, together with a lot of on-hit items are magic damage. Kassadin is 1.0 magic damage. Karma has a lot of magic damage. Vi has a bit of physical damage, so they have plenty of damage. They just need more tanks, like I already stated. And let's see here. Illaoi is a very interesting pick, and this is why we watch the LGL. We see the Illaoi, we get to see the Annie, we get to see these exciting champions. There's no Lucian Naomi that I have to complain about. I just have to complain about the Zeri here, because she's bad against the particular composition here. But this is exciting. Illaoi provides a lot more physical attack damage, so they have a lot of damage. They have arguably 2.0 physical damage and 2.0 magic damage, which is actually rather absurd. Does a lot of damage they have, and Illaoi loves drawn out fights and excels really well at them. So I'm actually really looking forward to seeing how it goes in the game, but I do think that Fennel here is the advantageous in the draft. It's a more cohesive draft. Apart from the Vi, it's a rather cohesive with what they want to do, where they excel, and they just synergize a lot with each other. They do well until Sengoku's Gaming's draft. Apart from the Annie, the Zeri will be a bit difficult to deal with, but that's where the Vi Ultimate will be able to help a lot. So I'm just really excited to actually see how this will play out, but I will watch that for myself. So that's my thought on the draft. Things are just gonna play out here. So it was a lot to cover. It was definitely a lot to talk about, and there's probably more topics I need to bring up in the future. Like I haven't brought up actually synergy, semi-synergy, quasi-synergy, and anti-synergy yet, even though some of those terminologies are very self-explanatory. Not all of them are, like what the heck is a quasi-synergy. I will probably have to do that in the future, but now at least I've been able to get my thoughts about a bit of complementary synergies, a bit about what characters should be banned and when, and my personal thoughts on a lot of these champions. So I think that's a pretty good ending point for the first video. It's a lot of rambling and stuff, but yeah, hopefully it's been alright. So with that said, I want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your morning, day, or evening, or whatever time it is for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. So until then, take care.